And we're off. Hi, gang. Welcome back. We are back for another segment of the 2025 Miami Dolphins training camp preview. Joined once again by Dante Collinelli, the deputy editor of Miami Dolphins on SI. Check out his fine work at the website. Free content. You see the Twitter handle here at Dante Collinelli. Dante, we're talking running backs today, and there's been some shuffling on the Miami Dolphins. Oh, before I forget, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. The All Offense Podcast. It would mean a whole lot to me and to Dante as well. So please.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Dolphins running backs, some changes in the offseason. Dolphins said bye to Raheem Mostert. They said bye to Jeff Wilson Jr., although not quite as officially as Raheem Mostert, who they released, because with Jeff Wilson Jr., it was just that his contract ran out and they did not resign him as an unrestricted free agent. And as we're taping this, Jeff is still looking for a team, and I think he's too good a player not to have at least some team call him and say, we need some depth in the running back spot. Dolphins instead brought in Alexander Madison, Ollie Garden, 2 in the draft. And where do we start with this? Devon Achan, star, superstar, elite, not elite. Where does he rank?
I mean, I think he's a good running back, right? Like, I don't know if I'd call him a star, if I'd call him elite. I think he could be those things. He certainly has enough talent, right? Obviously, everybody points to the speed, but I think when he's at his best, you see a running back who was really, really balanced in his ability to take on contact despite being small, his ability to pick his way through the line, keep the offense on track. Now, that was 2 years ago. Last year, we didn't get that version of Devon Achan. We got a version of Achan whose vision was a little bit shaky at times, who didn't take on contact as well as he did as a rookie. And there's a million reasons why the Dolphins' running game was super stagnant last year. We could do an entire 30-minute podcast on that if we really wanted to. But from Achan's perspective, I think ultimately what I've kind of seen just watching back the tape, this offseason for, different pieces that we've done, is that I think this was a player who just had a little bit too much on his plate last year. I think they just had a bit more, too much of an over-reliance on him in the running game. I mean, he led the team in carries by a country mile. And then he was also one of the team's most targeted receivers out of the backfield. I mean, they threw him the ball a ton. And so this was a player who just had so many touches. There was so much on his plate as a year 2 guy who, was a rotational piece really as a rookie. He was not, an every game starter as a rookie. And so I think they just put a little bit too much on his plate. I think, if you go back and read a lot of what not only we wrote, but what a lot of people wrote about Achan coming out of Texas A&M was that, hey, this is your lightning complement to a thunder, right? Like you want him to get, 10 to 15 carries a game, 10 to 15 touches a game, whatever, metric you want to use. You want to use him a lot. You can give him a lot of volume and that's fine. But, this is not a player that I think you want to get, 20 plus carries a game consistently every single week and just have like nobody behind him who can step up and take some of that pressure off of him, especially at this point in Achan's career. Maybe he, gets better as he gets older. That's definitely a chance. A lot of players do, and he's got plenty of talent. But so for me, I think Achan's a good running back. I think he's going to start the majority of the games this year. I still think that he's going to be the guy who gets most of the carries. I'm sure he'll still get a ton of targets. I think it's finding a better balance. And so not as relying on this player to do everything for you in the running game and in the short passing game. It's finding other pieces of the puzzle that can complement him a little bit better. I think they just put too much on his plate in 2024. And obviously the blocking up front wasn't as good as it was in 2023. And so I think when you put those things together, you get why he took such a step back last year and why he wasn't quite the same.
He wasn't the same in terms of efficiency. The volume was there. And I said this a few times on the podcast last year that I did not like the fact that he became the focal point of the offense because, as you said, to me, he's like the complimentary long ball hitter coming off. I don't want to say coming off the bench, but not necessarily the focal point. The focal point of the offense to me still should be Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, maybe to a lesser degree. And last year it became, again, partly because defenses were, playing very soft coverage and all that, but it became all about Devon Achan, and partly that's part of the reason the offense were not nearly explosive. I mean, the guy's numbers in 2023 was at 7 yards per carry, which is completely ridiculous. Obviously, there was no way he was going to be able to duplicate that last year, particularly when he got more and more carries. And I'm glad that you pointed out that, because I know a lot of fans want to go directly at the offensive line for the lack of the running game last year. Not like the running backs broke a ton of tackles either. Let's be honest here, because I think I look at some metrics in terms of yards before contact produced by the offensive line. The Dolphins were not at the bottom, or I don't know that they were close to the bottom either. So it wasn't just on the running backs. Ideally, yeah. And another point that you mentioned, led the team in carries by a wide margin. In fact, since Mike McDaniel's been here, it's always been more than 2-1 from the first running back in terms of most carries to the second one. Mm-hmm. And do the Dolphins, again, if you have Derrick Henry on your team, absolutely. You have Saquon Barkley on your team, absolutely. You have McCaffrey on your team, absolutely. Is the gap, and then I'm going to open myself up here for some backlash, but is the gap in terms of ability between Devon Achan and Jalen Wright, for example, that wide that it should be more than 2-1 in terms of carries? I don't know, which brings us to Jalen Wright, who last year, by the way, this offseason, holy smokes, did he look impressive physically. I mean, bigger and more cut. I mean, his muscles have muscles. Last year showed flashes, the numbers toward the end of the year, and again, combination, bad blocking up front, not making guys miss, not breaking tackles. Look at his yards per carry average in his last 6 or 7 games. It is, I mean, woof. If he's averaging 3.3, it's a good game in the last few games. Obviously, that needs to be better. There's reason to believe that he could be in for a good second year. He was highly explosive at Tennessee. Again, showed flashes, particularly it was a New England game where he looked really, really good. What's a fair expectation for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Wright, it ultimately comes down to, are they going to give him a chance to prove it, right? I don't really think he got it last year. I think, he didn't get a ton of touches. They just went all in on Devon Achan, and, the coaching staff has kind of talked about how, hey, he wasn't up to, the finer details of the running back position and different things like that. That's been like kind of the theme of, what they've said about him this offseason. And they said they've seen a lot of improvement, right? If I remember correctly, Mike McDaniel said, when we did our postseason interview with him, I challenged him, I challenged him. I wanted to see how he responded. And, again, they're going to say this time of the year. They'll probably say this any time of the year, frankly. But if we want to take it at face value, it seems like he's responded well. You mentioned that he looks good. He looks like he's in better shape. And
he looks great. He doesn't look
good.
He
looks great. Even better, right? So, I think ultimately, if they give Wright an opportunity, I feel like he'll make good on it. I don't know that he's going to be like a super elite running back or anything like that, but I do think he's got a lot of really nice traits that complement Devon Achan. I think he's a better pass blocker. I think they can use him a little bit more in that capacity. I think he's obviously bigger. He's a bit more powerful. He runs a little bit harder. Giving him some opportunities in those short yardage situations, I think could be interesting. I think letting him run inside as opposed to just, running the outside zone stretch plays all the time. I think giving him some of those looks could also be really interesting. I think if they give him an opportunity, I think, he'll do well with it. I do. I'm fairly confident in that. I liked his tape at Tennessee. I think when he was set up and in a rhythm last year, I thought he was better. They kind of, towards the end, it was just like sporadic carries and, some reverses and different things like that. And he just didn't quite seem to be like on his P's and Q's, frankly. And then the line wasn't great. And, the play calling, there's a million reasons why the running game wasn't great last year. It's really hard to sit here for me and be like, I just thought Jalen Wright wasn't very good. And I don't think that's true. I think he was fine with the opportunities that he was given. And so ultimately, if they want to make this closer to a 50-50 split, I don't think they're going to make it a 50-50 split, but something closer to that. If it's, 60-40 would be interesting, at least start that way and see how it goes. I think Jalen Wright brings a lot to the table that Devon Achan does not, while also being redundant in the sense that he has the long speed. He can also catch the ball out of the backfield. He's not quite the receiver that Achan is, but he's functional. And so to me, you can do a lot of really interesting things with those skill sets in the backfield. And last year, they didn't seem like they even wanted to try, frankly. And so I think that's going to be the change, is whether or not Jalen Wright can prove to them that he deserves that type of output. And we'll see how it goes. It's going to be one of the more interesting things to watch for in training camp in the preseason.
Yeah, and I'm looking at his game-by-game numbers here. So I mentioned the game at New England, he had 13 for 86, which is good. And at Indy, the following week, he only has 5 carries for 33 yards. And then once the Rams game hit, his yards per carry average, and it's not necessarily a ton of carries, but it was 0.6, 0.8, 4.0 against New England the second time. Didn't carry the ball once against Green Bay, then 3.5, 3.0. Didn't play against San Francisco, even though he was active. Didn't carry against Cleveland, and then had 6 carries for -4 yards against the Jets. So it did go south. I do think I would like a lot more of a 1A, 1B situation than a 1 and 2, because, again, Devon Achan is, to me, he's a bigger, potentially better Darren Sproles. I mean, I don't know if in terms of how he should be used. I don't know if I necessarily liked. Because obviously he's twice the size. So I don't know if that's. But in terms of how he should be used, that's how I would like for him to see Devon Achan be used. Not as your main guy, because to me, that's not his best usage, and I'm not expecting 7 yards a carry again like he did in 2023 when Raheem Mostert was the lead back. But I think that's a better usage for him. Now that the quote unquote big back, even though Jalen Wright, as I mentioned, looks big, comes down to, I guess, Alexander Madison, who they signed as a free agent from the Raiders, and then Ollie Gordon too, who led the NCAA in rushing in 2023. Fell a little bit in 2024 behind what everybody has agreed was a pretty poor offensive line and around a pretty bad Oklahoma State offense. So should it be – and I don't know that it's a given that's Madison who's going to be the number 3 back. I really don't. I think Gordon's got a chance to beat him out in training camp. I think, to me, that's almost a toss-up right now.
Yeah, that would not surprise me at all. I think Madison's tape from last year is not good. Like it's just not. I don't really have like a ton of positives to glean from it. I think you see a player who has lost a lot of speed in a very short period of time. He looks slow. He looks lethargic. He's got some power behind his frame, and so I think that's probably why they signed him, is to look at him as a possible, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 option. And I understand the reasoning behind that. But, frankly, I didn't see a ton in Alexander Madison's tape from last season that makes me feel optimistic that he can be a really good contributor for this team. And so I would not be surprised if Ollie Gordon unseats him fairly quickly, frankly. The thing with Gordon that's tricky is that, as you mentioned, led NCAA in rushing in 2023. I think you saw a player who, if he had come out then, was probably a top 75 pick at worst, right? He probably goes on day 2. You watch the 2024 tape. Yeah. Oklahoma State, they were terrible. I mean, they were awful. They were so bad. The offensive line was not very good. I'm not going to deny that. Ollie Gordon wasn't good either. And so I think you saw a player who looked slow, was not able to make cuts very well, made some questionable decisions behind his line. Now he dealt with a lot. There were guys flying in from gaps that shouldn't have been flying in because guys missed blocks, and Oklahoma State's offense was incredibly predictable. Everyone knew that they could sell out to stop him, and that would be the end of it pretty much, because they couldn't really attack in the passing game. So, look, there's a lot of information around that, but ultimately Ollie Gordon wasn't very good last year. And so the Dolphins are going to have to bet on him being a little bit better than he was last year. To me, this is a 2 running back room. I think whoever ends up being running back 3, I don't know that they're going to see a ton of carries. I don't have a ton of confidence in Alexander Madison or Ollie Gordon, if I'm being completely honest. I think I like Gordon better than Madison for sure. And I think given where the Dolphins are at in their roster building process, I would rather invest time in a young player than I would in a veteran like Alexander Madison, even if they're close, honestly. So that's my prediction. But to me, it's Achan and it's Wright, and everyone else is just kind of there. And if they get into the game, I think that means it's going to be 1 or 2 carries in short yardage, or there was an unfortunate injury that forced them up the depth chart.
So basically, you're saying it's Achan, Wright, and everything else is wrong.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. So then I would surmise, based on those comments, that you think the Dolphins were better last year when they had Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. instead of Madison and Gordon, correct?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Mostert wasn't very good last year, but I think from a pedigree perspective, I think they were probably better last year. But ultimately, I don't know how much stock I'm going to put in depth running backs. To me, it's the same starter. It's Achan. If Achan isn't better in 2025, I don't know that it matters who's behind him. He's still going to get the majority of the carries, the majority of the touches. He has to be better this year, or the running game is still going to have problems. So yeah, I would say probably.
And we're back. Here we go. We have a little internet issue here. 10 seconds. And yeah, we're back. I do not like these internet issues. Okay, since it wasn't too brief, the delay, we'll just keep on going. The thing is, with Raheem Mostert, what needs to be assessed with him is he got injured in the opener. He was coming off the fabulous 2023 season. He's got some age on him. Not as much mileage as his age would suggest he has because, again, his career took a while to get going. But then he gets hurt against Jacksonville early on. Wasn't right physically for a bit. Then he comes back. He has the fumbles against the Colts and the Bills. Then gets, is there another way of saying it, a little bit in the doghouse. Kind of lost a little bit of his role of his carries. And Jeff Wilson Jr., for some reason, was put on ice. Not sure why, because I like Jeff Wilson Jr. I think he's a good running back as a complimentary dude when you need more than 2 or 3. And this is what they had. So I do think they were better last year, with the caveat of was last year an indication that Raheem Mostert's career is heading into the fourth quarter and the 2-minute warning's approaching, or was it just a blip, one of those Murphy's Law seasons after having a perfect storm, a beautiful perfect, if that makes any sense, a beautiful perfect storm in 2023 where he got the ball often near the goal line and found the end zone all the time. So, but I don't know that there's any way to really argue the fact that on paper they were better at this time last year heading into this season with what they had than this year. Of course, if Ollie Gordon Jr., Ollie Gordon 2 goes back to 2023 Ollie Gordon with that kind of production, and certainly we could revisit, but shockingly enough, as you're going to hear us say throughout this series of position previews, there's some ifs.
A lot of ifs. You could have an if. There's probably an if at every position, and they're not small ones either. They're big ones, and so that's going to be the challenge. I will say that ultimately, I do think Achan and Wright are a good 1-2 punch. We can sit here and talk about were they better last year or worse. I think Achan and Wright are good players. They have talent. I think, the team has made a commitment to fixing the blocking this year. And I think there's a decent chance that they have bounce back seasons. So I think the running back room is solid. I know I was hard on the Alexander Madison, Ollie Gordon combo, but they're fine. If they're your third, fourth back, that's fine. It is what it is. Yeah, I don't know. I ultimately though, I think it comes down to whether or not Achan's better this year. He has to bounce back. If he doesn't, I don't know that anyone else in this room is going to save that. You know what I mean? And so I think that's where the pedigree of Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson kind of comes in. It separates last year's group from this year's group.
Fair enough. Okay, let's look around the division here. You can take one back for 2025. Do you want Devon Achan or do you want James Cook?
Ooh. Am I factoring contract or is this just talent? Because I have no desire to pay James Cook $20 million a year, which is what he's gunning for. So
fair.
If we are
in terms of talent,
I do think James Cook's a little bit more well-rounded at this point in the process. I think Achan can get there, though. I don't know that they're natural talent. I actually think Achan's more naturally talented, but Cook has become a really well-rounded rusher. In recent years, he's really found himself behind that Buffalo offensive line. His vision has improved. His contact balance has improved. He's become a much more consistent player. And I think that's what Achan was missing last year. So I think overall, like natural talent, I think Achan's better. Long term, I'd rather have Achan because I have no desire to pay James Cook as one of the best running backs in the league. But right now, if I had to line them up on, July, whatever, I think I'd probably take James Cook.
Okay, so as we look around the AFC East, James Cook's the guy who stands out in Buffalo. They also have Ray Davis, who's not a bad backup at all. The Patriots bring back Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. They also selected Travion Henderson from Ohio State in the second round, right after the Dolphins took Jonas Avainaya. And in fact, it came out as we chronicled on Miami Dolphins on SI.com that the Patriots they were thinking about Avainaya before the Dolphins took him. They wound up taking Henderson. That's a nice little 3-pack right there. And then the Jets have Breece Hall coming back. Still hasn't been able to duplicate what he did as a rookie when he was a complete stud before he went down with an ACL injury. And as I'm trying to remember here quickly who their other running backs are, Isaiah Davis they have, and Braylon Allen, the big back from Wisconsin, is a big dude. I don't know that this might be one of the positions where there's the least separation among teams in the AFC East from one team to another. Would you go along with that?
Yeah, I think it's a product of the running back position in general. I think so much of running back comes down to preference, right? Like I look at a player like Ramondre Stevenson and, he's probably the slowest of the group, right? But he's a bit more powerful. He's a bit more consistent, right? Like I think a lot of it comes down to preference. If I had to stack them, I would probably have the Dolphins second. I like Achan. I do think that he's a little bit better than Breece Hall and a little bit better than Ramondre Stevenson, but I agree with you. I don't think there's a huge gap. And if somebody came to me and said, hey, I like Breece Hall better than Devon Achan, I would understand where they're coming from. And so I think that there's not a huge gap here. Even, if I have James Cook at 1, I don't know that he's too far ahead of the other players. I think ultimately he also has the best surroundings of this group as well. And at running back, I do think that matters more than a lot of other positions. So I would put the Dolphins second, but I don't think the gap between any of these backfields are too big in any way.
No, I agree. And as you mentioned, running back is one of those positions. I think you look around the NFL, and I think I mentioned those guys like McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley. Am I missing somebody who really stands out? And then you have a bunch of really good running backs, but I don't know. There's somebody who's really blows you away. I mean, those are, yeah, I know we want to call them the unicorns, but for lack of a better word, the unicorns at the position, the guys who really should be central focal points of an offense. Okay, that's going to do it. Again, as always, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We will be back before you know it with another segment of our comprehensive training camp preview for 2025. He is Dante. I am Alain. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day.